It's because of these people this country gets to eat at a reasonable cost.
I think that migrant workers are probably among the most at-risk population because they are largely undocumented.
Nada, ¿qué podemos pensar? Lo que él diga, pues tenemos que irnos, pues.
Okay, he says what can I think? If he says we have to go, we have to go. In Vermont, most of the migrant workers that we have are school-age boys between the ages of 14 and probably 35.
The dirty jobs, the dangerous jobs with cattle, horses, you know, the things that take great physical strength and that tend to be very hard on the body. These young men are doing those jobs.
Americans, we would think, oh God, I wouldn't want to milk cows at 4 o'clock in the morning and get all dirty, or I don't want to, you know, clean toilets, or I don't want to, you know, any number of things that we don't want to do because it's a bad job. That's a completely foreign principle. The only bad job is no job.
It amazes me what these people will go through and the chances they'll take. And this is all for a job and to send money back to their family, you know, so they're pretty desperate.
So if you're willing to trade 5 or 10 years of your life in America doing unbelievably tough, dirty, dangerous jobs, but then to be able to, you know, move back to where you're from and enjoy a much higher standard of living, that's a trade-off that you can understand millions of people making.
Basically, you'd wake up at whatever time your shift was about to start, and then you'd go and you'd milk. There was a farm that I was on that had like maybe like 8 guys. They have this thing called cama caliente, which means hot bed, because they're sleeping in the same bed in shifts, basically. So one guy would sleep, and then the next guy would be milking while he was sleeping, and then they'd switch and he'd sleep in the bed that the other guy was in. And
there would be a lot less farms in Vermont right now if there weren't any migrant workers, and if not less farms, certainly a lot less cows.
But I think for many Vermonters, they're not aware of the extent to which Vermont dairy, you know, the iconic business of Vermont, milking cows and selling cream and butter and milk, that industry is really undergirded now. You know, there are some of these large farms that more than 50% of their workforce is migrant workers. And, you know, I'm talking about people who are milking in excess of 1,000 cows. So if they just walked away one day, they would be in tough, tough shape. I don't know how they would ever manage that. We had a lot of farmers come in and testify that their farm could only run with this sort of work, this sort of labor. And they were standing up for their workers regardless of where they came from, regardless of their documentation. With that said, we also had testimony about farmers who were callous, who were sometimes deliberately cruel, or who were occasionally exploiting workers. Been here for a long time saving your butt when it comes to the dairy industry, so treat them the way they deserve to be treated.
There is actually no way for them to be documented legally to do this work because none of them have the intention of living here as a permanent resident. They just want to come and get a temporary visa to work, but you can't get a temporary visa for agricultural work. The law is sort of written in such a way that there's no way to do it legally.
You know, being undocumented, I think about when I see an immigration officer or a police officer that I might try to get down and hide because I'm aware of my situation being undocumented.
No estamos seguros, pues, de hecho, pues, no estamos legales aquí. Yo comprendo esa situación, pues, mía, pues.
We won't even be able to go to the store. If someone sees you, they're going to grab you.
Friends that farm up on the Canadian border, and their workers do not leave the farm for fear of being caught.
They can't even really be seen walking from the house to the barn because there are people who will try and take action to get them deported. So they would talk about going to a store in, you know, Montgomery, and somebody would just call the police and say there's an illegal in the store just because they would have they look Mexican.
Conditions on the farm are still not really regulated in the way that might promote health and safety generally.
It's cold, it's lonely, it's stinky working on a farm, it's dangerous. There was a student killed in an accident in Franklin County when I was working. That was very much in the news. It was an accident like any other, but it was devastating.
Very often when immigrants, whether refugees or not, come to America from another country, they want to settle in parts of the United States where there are a lot of people from that country from which they came. And because we're a relatively small, unpopulated state, we don't have large communities of immigrants from particular areas.
They're isolated on farms, which are in the middle of nowhere. They don't get to go to school, and they don't really get to meet anybody else. There was a lot of depression, a lot of frustration, a lot of loneliness. I would do one-on-one tutoring, or sometimes two-on-one tutoring in the home, and sometimes I would be one of the only people outside of work that student would talk to in a week.
Yes, of course it feels really lonely. I have a wife and 5 children, and I'm here because I'm paying for their school. I have 3 kids in college, and I think it'll be pretty soon that I go back, because I miss them.
Por eso es que estoy acá, pues, porque mucho dinero en la escuela, ellos están en la universidad ya, tengo 3 en la universidad y ahí van, o sea, ya pues la cosa es de que sí se extraña la familia, pues la familia es lo que más se extraña y pues yo digo que ahí voy, ya no falta poquito.
So the state's confronting this challenge is relatively recent, and since there's a collision with the interests of the federal law, that's where we need to find a solution that works for both the federal government and farmers of Vermont.
I have to say that the Trump administration has made it clear that they're going to, if not round up every illegal immigrant, as they say, in the country, then they're going to make life difficult in various ways. So I think the Obama administration in 5 years will be looked on as a high point for migrant worker rights federally. In terms of what Vermont can do, you saw the protests in Montpelier over the past weekend. You had 15,000 people come to the State House, shut down Interstate 89. So there's a huge backlash to Trump-style politics here. Maybe that means we can leverage greater security for these people at the state level, including Vermont. I hope that's the case.
Law is federal. States don't have foreign policies. We don't have borders that we control. That's a federal function, and that's why it's so important that we keep pressure on the federal government to fix it.
Vermont's a compassionate state, and it tends to elect people to the House and the Senate that are compassionate people. So given a full understanding of the context, I think people support these individuals, and they understand the key role they're playing in saving the dairy industry. With that said, some of them are worried that their constituents will see them as soft on crime because they're countenancing illegal immigration, maybe. And so that's something I had to be sensitive to bringing the bill forward, that not everybody could shout their support from the rooftops.
I was a little bit confused by the seeming conflict of interest, because Migrant Ed is a federally funded program, just like any other part of the educational system. And so is, Border Patrol. So why was it, like, I'm working for the government and Border Patrol's working for the government, so why should I be worried about Border Patrol following me to my job and interfering with what I'm doing when we're both employees of the same entity? I'm really concerned that Donald Trump will ask that sort of same question. and come to a different conclusion.
So it's a very dicey balance trying to use the law to protect these people. At the same time, you're trying to avoid shining a spotlight that might upset their fragile legal status.
So it's got to be a change in policy at the federal level, and I hope that our folks in Washington of both political parties can work together and find a way. We can't just ignore the fact that so many undocumented workers are in this country. Ignoring the situation isn't going to make it go away, and in places like Vermont, many of them are integral to our economic success.
It amazes me what these people will go through and the chances they'll take, and this is all for a job and to send money back to their family, you know.
We have a whole host of issues around healthcare, around their ability to form up as a community because they didn't have transportation, how would they shop, medical care, a whole raft of things. And so we started taking testimony and ultimately decided that driver's licenses were a solution to half of those.
I think we need to change the visa law to accommodate year-round workers. It's pretty simple, really. I think the values of Vermont, the history that we share is conducive to welcoming people to be a part of our communities. We just have to get the word out.
The ones that originally came were only here seasonal, more so, like during the summer, and they'd go back home to family in the winter. And I can remember as far back as the 90s when I first started them, how every time they went back home was a reminder of why I went that route to start with, because it would start all back over again. It was hard to retain employees and get, you know, reliable help and that would show up.
There's both the groups that are sort of housed within formal organizations like UVM or Middlebury College, but then there's also the farm worker-led groups that are more of a grassroots or migrant farm worker-led kind of effort.
From a public safety standpoint, I think we're better off ensuring that these migrant workers have been educated about the rules of the road, examined and licensed as other people do. So I think that's one step that the state has taken that is good for everybody.
I mean, I think it would be an easy fix just to make a program where they could do this work legally. People have the misconception a lot that they're coming here to permanently stay, that they're coming to intentionally steal jobs that Americans could have had. And that's just, neither one of those things is accurate.
A car and the ability to drive it in the state of Vermont means he can go on his own to get health care. He can go to the store to get his own groceries. And when it comes to networking with his community, he can form up with them anytime he wants rather than needing to wait for an organization like Migrant Justice to provide the transportation to bring them together.
You know, sometimes people have enough access to just calories or basic food, but it's the particular culturally familiar foods that they're missing. And so that's what we really try to prioritize.
But in the end, I hope we can encourage our representatives in Washington to find a way to change the law that makes sense. We can't just ignore the fact that so many undocumented workers are in this country. Ignoring the situation isn't going to make it go away, and in places like Vermont, many of them are integral to our economic success. So it's got to be a change in policy at the federal level, and I hope that our folks in Washington of both political parties can work together and find a way.